Groupthink. When you hear that word, what do you think? Do you picture hive minds, mind control, and armies of brainwashed drones? Perhaps it brings to mind teamwork and prophetic dreams or telepathy. Whatever groupthink means to you right now, it's a much deeper issue than you might believe. William H. White Jr. coined the term in 1952 Fortune magazine, describing it as a perennial failing of mankind. What we are talking about is a rationalized conformity, an open, articulate philosophy which holds that group values are not only expedient but right and good as well. Basically, in layman's terms, groupthink is a phenomenon in social psychology that is characterized by one's belief that their group values are the correct ones, and sometimes the only ones. Irving Janis, a research psychologist at Yale University, described the symptoms of groupthink characterized in three types. Type 1. Overestimations of the group, where illusions of invulnerability and unquestioned belief in the morality of the group take place. Type 2. Closed-mindedness, characterized by the rationalizing warnings and stereotyping those who are opposed to the group as weak, evil, biased, spiteful, impotent, or stupid. Type 3. Pressures towards uniformity, which features self-censorship of ideas that differ from the group's views, illusions of unanimity among group members, direct pressure to conform placed on any member who questions the group, couched in terms of disloyalty and mind guards, self-appointed members who shield the group from dissenting information. So how could this be positive, you ask? Illusions of invulnerability implies that conformity to a group creates the right environment to foster delusions of grandeur and infallibility. Closed-mindedness also creates this right situation to make those opposed to the group out to be evil or biased. Pressures towards uniformity, conforming to a group that you're either with or against. Don't dispute any of us or you're evil and weak and we'll crush you. That sounds like every supervillain ever. But does groupthink have any positive aspects? Is all the pressure to conform and in-group, out-group bias really all that bad? These days it seems to create more problems than necessary. Since it is an innate quality of intelligent beings to want to be included in a group and avoid conflict among their peers, groupthink appears to make sense at a glance. Of course, the group works together at a subconscious level to make avoiding conflict and decision-making easier. Oftentimes, the group is on the same page about a lot anyway, so why is it an issue? To explain this much, we'll probably need a couple of definitions. First, let's look at the psychological definition of a group. A group is defined as two or more humans who interact with one another, accept expectations and obligations as members of the group, and share a common identity. So, in short, you have to at least be cooperative with someone to be in a group with them, and preferably have something in common. Next, let's get a concrete definition of conformity. The tendency to act or think like members of a group, and match attitudes, belief, and behaviors to group norms. This pretty easily describes how we've been describing group, right? So what's the difference? Groupthink, in most senses, is viewed as a more toxic and intense example of conformity. But does it have to be toxic? Is it always something to be avoided, something sinister that only cults and fandoms are capable of producing? Well, it often isn't. Humans want to be in groups. As a species, we generally have an aversion to conflict, and we want to avoid rocking the boat as much as possible. This sentiment doesn't just apply to groups today, though. For instance, let's look back at our roots. Conformity likely started occurring, well, when humans did. We were all out for the same goal, survival, but we couldn't do it alone, so we banded together to split the duties more evenly and make living easier. Our children couldn't survive if their mothers were always fighting amongst one another, and our fathers couldn't support them without sharing the prey and working together to catch it. How does this apply to the modern day, though? The in-group, out-group seems to be at a much steeper divide than it was back then when we were only trying to survive, so how about today? Well, businesses and clubs wouldn't be able to flourish if they weren't composed of cohesive groups that worked well together. This is probably where groupthink starts to come in instead of just normal conformity. Heck, even animals exhibit similar behaviors when it comes to groups. Fish, for instance, school together in order to avoid predators, encourage breeding, and conserve energy when crossing large distances. They appear to have the ability to share their consciousness to a bizarre extent. This is similar to how early tribes of humans banded together for the same reasons. Is this groupthink, though? Not really. The groupthink theory is only really applicable to what we think of as intelligent beings. Fish and lions can't exactly participate in psychological studies, and we can't really interview our ancestors. Groupthink is generally a phenomenon that requires one to have the ability to uphold ideals, not just avoid predators or something. In the end, though, even modern studies on this specific topic are few and far between. It's still hotly debated among scientists, and the fact is that groupthink is a phenomenon that's usefulness hasn't really been extensively looked into. Perhaps it just hasn't occurred to anyone in the psych scene, but a more likely explanation is that we simply don't have the evidence to prove it one way or the other once and for all. It's a highly speculative issue, and until we find some missing link to explain the function of this phenomenon in our species, it's really up to whether you're willing to believe the group.